With the engine currently being worked on at the machine shop, I thought I'd have a look at the carburettor. It turns out after inspection of the ID tag that the carb is a HIF 44 which originally was fitted to an automatic 1275 Metro engine. There's a couple of things that I'm going to have to sort out before I can get this working properly on my manual 1293. The problem is that I don't know anything about carburettors, but what I do know is that a new one costs around £600. Now I could get this one serviced, but it costs almost the same as a new one, and I just don't have the budget for that. So I'm going to have to go it alone and try and suss things out for myself. I figured that the best thing to do first was to take plenty of pictures for reference. I also took this opportunity to have a quick look around the carburettor and see if I can suss out how things work. It's quite tricky to see them properly when they're in the car, so now was probably the best chance that I had of learning as much as I could. So the first thing that I did was to remove the air filter. This was easy enough to do. Now I must stress at this point that the video isn't meant to be an instructional of any kind. It is really just me stripping down a carburettor and learning as I go along. For the strip down I was initially using YouTube videos, but there was so much conflicting information that I ended up finding a really good source which I'll show you in a minute. Anyway, once I'd removed the filter, the casing and the screws in the gasket, they went straight into a box so that I've got all the parts I've taken off in one place. The dashpot was next, just 3 screws and the ID tag. The tag proved to be really useful as it helped to identify the carburettor. I tested the screws to make sure that they were able to be tightened up and not threaded in any way. The manifold though was quite heavy and was making working on the carb a little tricky, so I decided to hold off on removing the screws completely and unbolted the manifold from the carb, which was being held on by just 4 nuts. Then I removed the damper and gave it a quick inspection, although if I'm honest, I'm not actually really sure I knew what I was doing. Then it was off with the dashpot. Now, I didn't know how to remove the piston, and I didn't initially see that it had a circlip holding it in place. But it was good to see the needle because it's something that always crops up in conversation on the forums, with many questions being asked about correct needles for carbs, so now I have a vague idea what people are talking about. The needle itself was held in place by a little retaining screw, and once I removed it, the needle came straight out. There's an ID number that's stamped on the needles. My eyes just couldn't read it, so it was a case of using my phone as a magnifying glass and noting down which needle I have. I tried a few things to get the piston out before realising about the circlip, and once I removed that, the piston and spring came straight out. I examined the pieces for any signs of obvious wear, and this is when I ran into problems with conflicting information on YouTube, and I ended up finding an alternative source for information. See, several videos talked about a drop test, whereby you drop the piston from the dashpot and time how long it takes to fall, and depending on the time depends on how worn or mismatched the parts are. The problem is, all the videos had different times and methods, and I tried them all out, but this produced mixed results, and for 1 second I had a great carburettor, and then the next I had a carburettor that needed to go in the scrap bin. So I ended up searching for alternative guidance and found this website online, which is apparently the company that bought out SU Carbs, so I thought this would be the better guidance to follow. They had instructions on how to dismantle all the different SU Carbs, and I simply followed the instructions on the site, and I also gave them a call and got some good advice from them. It also became clear that I didn't need to dismantle all of the spindle mechanism on the carb as long as it worked properly, which it did. So I just removed all the parts necessary to get it working again. So now I have the proper instructions. The first thing that I had to do was remove the cover plate and the sealing ring. There's not a great deal to see inside. The carbs are fairly simple, but straight away you can see the float. One thing I did notice was that when you wind the mixture screw in and out, there are points where it doesn't raise or lower the jet, so sometimes when I see people ask on the groups about the mixture screw having no effect after giving the screw half a turn, it's possibly due to the fact that the screw hasn't yet come into contact with the mechanism. Anyway, for anyone who's interested, you can see the effect the screw has on the jet height inside the carburettor. Next it was out with the screw and the O-ring. And then the lever mechanism itself, which allows the jet to be removed. Then it was on to the float assembly. Next it was just a case of removing the needle valve and jet assembly as per instructions on the site. If you've been on this site, it's a wealth of information and there are a couple of books that they have that list every single part that you might need for your carburettor, which can be really helpful if and when you need to replace any component. So I left the rest of the carburettor intact and decided just to give it a clean. Now whether Jizzer is okay to use I'm not sure, but the carb has probably seen worse over its long life. The dashpot was really scratched and the edges were really sharp. I decided to smooth off any rough edges with a file, but I ended up making it look worse. So at this point I had nothing to lose. I took some heavy sanding tools to it and then fitted the dashpot to my lathe. I had to be really careful not to catch my fingers on the base of the dashpot, but working my way through various grips of sandpaper I was able to move most of the scratches and buff the dashpot until it looked like brand new again, and this whole process probably only took about half an hour. So the next step will be to order all of the necessary parts and fingers crossed the carburettor will soon be working again. Prior to making the videos on YouTube, I worked as a firefighter for nearly 20 years, serving my community and helping to save lives and promote the fire safety message. Unfortunately, an accumulation of many upsetting scenes became too much for my mind to cope with, and after years of failed therapy I was retired from the service on the grounds of ill health and signed off medically from any employment. To keep myself busy, both body and mind, I developed an interest in woodworking and car mechanics, and with already having a hobby in filming and music, I combined my interests and started making videos here on YouTube, filming, editing and composing my own music for my woodworking and car restoration channels Smugwood and Smugwood Mini. Unfortunately, to produce such videos comes at a price, and with minimal funds after being retired from employment, I've turned to Patreon to see if there is additional support out there which could allow me to continue making the woodworking and car restoration videos. In return for support, there are various levels which are explained in more depth at the Patreon link below, but includes the chance to win one of my YouTube projects made throughout the year, and also inclusion into random prize draws open to patrons only. In addition, I'd like to thank everybody who already subscribes to my channels, or watches, comments, likes and shares them, as it all goes to help support my channels, and for that I'm really appreciative. It's my hope that I can continue making the videos for the foreseeable future. Thanks once again for your continued support.